All right. This is going to be a doozy. I'm going to attempt to run through the entirety of the 2024 Tour de France fantasy game from the perspective of three participants in that game. On the left, you have myself, Joe Fox Jr., and the team that I fielded, which, spoiler alert, I did not do well. So these decisions in hindsight are not the best. In the middle, we have Tomas. He's a young kid from Portugal who actually was a member of our Discord server where we discussed strategy, and the whole community sort of rallied behind Tomas and helped him make decisions each day. And he represented the best of us, and we lived vicariously through him. He was in the lead for much of the tour globally. He was in first place globally, and he managed to hang on for fourth place in the global league out of hundreds of thousands of participants in the end. So we'll be looking at his moves. And then on the right here, we have RogerG 7312, who I don't know, but they won the overall league. So these are going to be the decisions that ultimately performed better than any other over the course of the tour. So with that in mind, let's look at the initial team. So for myself, I took a bit of a conservative strategy in that I went with the standard five big guns and three minimum cost riders strategy. So Alexis Renard, Fabien Grelier, Nikias Arndt, these guys all cost 5 stars. So they really represent just the minimum cost that I needed to spend to fill these roster slots. And then I left myself uh, enough points to secure five really big riders. And I went with Pogacar. As you'll see, all three of us have Pogacar for the duration of the tour, as everyone should. But I also went with Philipsen, Van Aert, Pedersen, and Pidcock. Three versatile sprinters or pure sprinters, as well as Pidcock, who I was taking a bit of a gamble on, but I expected him to do a lot better than he ended up doing. This represents a strategy that in past years would have done quite well. It would have given me ample opportunity to gain moderate points from all of these big riders in the first couple stages while I figured out who I needed to pick up, who I needed to drop, and then I'd have plenty of star or salary cap reserves because of these minimum cost riders to pick up whoever I needed to. So in fact, if you add up the cost of all of these riders, it doesn't total to 120, it totals to 118. And that's because I left myself 2 stars budget. And the thought being that I could, for example, trade out Wout van Aert for uh, someone who cost 21 stars, or I could trade out Pedersen or Pidcock for someone who cost 20 stars. Notably, Remco Evenepoel was on my radar as a white jersey contender, so I knew I would be picking him up at some point. If we look at Tomas's team, he took certainly a bit more of a aggressive strategy, as did Roger, and it's the story of the day. This is what pays in this world where we have breakaway points being awarded for every 1 kilometer you're in the break. You can't get away with having three roster slots that do nothing. You really need to earn points from all of your guys. And so you can see that these guys, they have no zero cost or no minimum cost riders. Tomas picked up Oliveira, Abrahamson, and Vandenbroek for 6 stars, 7 stars, 7 stars. And it's especially painful for me to see that I didn't take my own advice because I was really hyping up Jonas Abrahamson. I thought he was by far the most undercosted rider prior to the start of the tour last year. And it turns out I was right. But as you can see, I didn't have the guts to put him on my team because I wanted to have three minimum cost riders to leave myself the opportunity to make a single trade rather than a double trade later when I wanted to pick up a 20 cost rider, trading out Pidcock or Pedersen. So in any case, not only did Tomas pick up Jonas Abrahamson, who ended up being by far the most efficient point scorer in the entire game, more efficient than Tadej Pogacar by a lot, more than double his efficiency. Notably, he also picked two other low-cost riders that did really well, and especially you can see Frank Vandenbroek scored 500 points on stage one, and that was in fact the highest scoring. That was the highest point scorer for the day because of his time spent in the breakaway. Even though he, I think, gifted the win to his teammate Roman Bardet, which was beautiful. We all love to see Roman wear yellow in his last tour, but he was Frank was really the one doing all the work in the breakaway all day. So he scored the most points of anyone on the day, and Tomas was very lucky to have picked him up. If we look at Roger, Roger has a very similar team. He did take some, I think, unnecessary risks with Ciccone and Paulus. These picks didn't exactly pan out. They didn't work out great in the long run, but that goes to show you that even the winner of the whole league, out of hundreds of thousands of participants, the person who had the highest score at the end, even they made some, in hindsight, suboptimal decisions. So it's really cool to see how much room there is to really come back when you're behind. And in fact, Roger did not start the tour off in the league globally. I think he was at least several hundred places down after stage one, and but he did correctly pick Jonas Abrahamsson and Frank Vandenbroek, and those are the most important picks of of this tour, besides the obvious ones. Besides picking up Pogacar or Evenepoel, Philipsen was pretty safe. Notably, Tomas did not have Philipsen, I believe, at any point in this tour, which was interesting considering Philipsen was by far the clear favorite amongst sprinters. However, as we all know, Biniam Girmay surprised everyone by being just as competitive as Philipsen, perhaps more so. They went 3-3 for wins. So it didn't end up hurting Tomas that he chose to go with Evenepoel instead of another sprinter at the start. So just to recap, stage one was a hilly stage won by Roman Bardet. If we look at the points, the top scorer was Frank Vandenbroek ahead of his teammate Roman Bardet, and then pretty much the majority of the high point scorers for the rest of the day were folks that were in the breakaway. So nothing too surprising here. Let's look at stage two. So for stage two, we can see that none of the three teams we're looking at made any changes. Their rosters are identical, with the exception of this stage winner bonus that was changed for a couple of the teams. But look, just as a quick reminder, stage two was a hilly stage that went to the break. You can see all these red banners on PCS refer to people that were in the breakaway. Kevin Vauquelin was a surprise winner, winning the break. Jonas Abrahamsson missed out in the end. This was the closest he came to a win, but of course he still scored a ton of points. So if we look at the points scored for stage two, we can see Jonas at the top. Again, because of the breakaway points and because of the jersey competition points that he was earning from his performance the previous day and today, and the intermediate sprint, et cetera, he actually beat out the stage winner Kevin Vauquelin for total points on the day. But all of the break guys scored almost all the points on the day. Now, just a quick note, and I know I've said this in previous videos, but it's noteworthy that even just the top, 10 riders from the break scored 1,726 breakaway points, which is greater than all of the stage finish points from the top 100 finishers on the day, which was only 1,529. So this stage is the stage that I go back to when I point out just how drastically these breakaway points warp the game. It's a cool idea. I'm glad that we're rewarding breakaway riders in terms of the fantasy game, but it's just, it's too much. It's out of hand. It's far more than all of the yellow jersey standings points that are awarded at the end of each day. But let's look at stage three. So stage three was a flat stage, and this is where Biniam Girmay had his breakout, picking up his first Tour de France win, the first of three in this tour, and beginning his run towards green jersey competition dominance. Pretty exciting stage, obviously really big for Eritrea. Looking at the points on the day, this was a little bit less of an interesting day, given that there was effectively no breakaway. There were a couple riders that got out front for a little while. Grelier was on his own for a bit, but pretty much the whole peloton recognized that there's going to be a bunch sprint here, so nothing really exciting happened. And so this is a little bit more of a traditional stage from a points perspective in the fantasy game. The majority of the points are being awarded based on the stage finish and the jersey. So nothing too exciting here. Obviously, Biniam Girmay picked up the majority of the points. And if we look over at the three teams we're following, no one made any changes for stage three besides stage winner bonus selections. So nothing really to talk about here. Let's look at stage four. So stage four was our first mountain stage and the first opportunity for Tadej Pogacar to pick up a win and to put some time into his rivals. 35 seconds into Remco, 37 into Jonas. Pretty dominant fashion. More to come. No one really was too surprised in terms of the fantasy league. If we look at the points here, there were actually a fair number of points that were awarded to breakaway riders because there was a large breakaway on the day. However, it didn't last as long as on previous days and it didn't make it to the finish. So the winners on the day from a points perspective were focused pretty tightly around the GC guys that did well on the stage. And this is because there was also a very large impact on the yellow and white jersey competitions on this day because the time gaps were so large. So a little bit more of a normal stage from a fantasy league perspective. And if we look at our three heroes here, again, no trades being made. Unsurprisingly, everyone chose to double up on Tadej Pogacar for the day. Least surprising decision ever. Let's look at stage five. Here things get a little more interesting. So stage five was another flat stage, and this was, from a viewer perspective, one of the highlights of the tour for me last year. Mark Cavendish won his 35th record-breaking career Tour de France stage. Really, really great all around. I'm really glad he made it. He claims that he was targeting this stage specifically. I think he would have been happy to win any of the stages, but it was really great that he got it out of the way early. At this point, a lot of people were thinking, do we pick up Cavendish? Because he won this stage so dominantly in such dominant fashion that we thought maybe he's going to be competitive in all the future sprints. And a couple people did pick him up. My buddy Curtis actually picked him up right before the stage, so that was a great call. But he didn't end up really being super competitive for the rest of the tour, so it was wise that most people didn't pick him up after this. But nonetheless, it was great to see. If we look at the points on the day, there was a long breakaway, but only a couple riders were in it. So those riders were rewarded with a lot of points. But other than that, the majority of the points went to the sprinters on the day. So yeah, not too much more to say. If we look at our fantasy teams, though, a couple trades were made. So first of all, on the left here, I traded Pidcock for Evenepoel. I knew that we were going into an ITT in the next couple of days. He had just really established himself in the yellow and white jerseys with the mountain stage yesterday. It just felt like the right time. I wasn't wanting to continue to hope for Pidcock to get in good form when we hadn't really seen it. Tomas traded Wout van Aert and Pidcock for De Lee and Groenewegen. It actually was really good timing to pick up Groenewegen because he ended up winning the stage tomorrow. Spoiler alert. And De Lee, again, it was wise to pick up a sprinter. I ended up picking up De Lee a little bit later on, but he didn't have quite the tour we were looking for. He was always there or thereabouts, but he didn't end up spiking the win. In any case, it was the right time to pick up some sprinters. And then if we look at Roger picked up Girmay and got rid of Paulus. Paulus wasn't really doing much useful at this point in the tour, so it was a wise choice of trade here. And in fact, it was his first trade that he had made, the first trades that any of us made on stage five. So let's look at stage six. Stage six was another flat stage. This time, Dylan Groenewegen won. Notably, Girmay was in second here. Philipsen was not competitive. I don't remember if he crashed or what happened here, but I know Van der Poel finished ahead of him. I forget exactly what happened, but another great consistent result from Girmay, and this ended up being the only win for Dylan Groenewegen. If we look on the points on the day, there again wasn't much of a breakaway to speak of, so most of the points went to the sprinters based on their finish on the day, with a few people jumping in the middle based on their standings in the jersey competitions, notably Pogacar and Evenepoel. If we look over at the fantasy teams, no one made any trades on these days. Again, as I mentioned, Tomas had just picked up Dylan Groenewegen, so it ended up being really good timing for him, as it was the only stage he ended up winning. In fact, Tomas traded him the next day. So nice little snag for 2 days with Groenewegen. So let's look at stage seven. So stage seven was the ITT. It did have some elevation to it. It was a moderately long, I'd say maybe medium length, but long for today's day and age. ITT. Evenepoel was the clear favorite, and he actually squeaked it out only by 12 seconds ahead of Pogacar, which I guess was a little closer than some people were expecting, but it went to show how great form Tadej was in. No major surprises here in terms of the top GC riders. The top four favorites going into the tour were the top four finishers on the day. If we look at the fantasy points on the day, not a ton of surprises here. The majority of the points went to the folks that had done well on the stage, because those folks who did well on the stage also were folks who were in pretty good position in the jersey competitions. Note that this does not include any specific time bonuses that were, or point bonuses that were granted to the fantasy teams based on their guess of the finish. I can pull that up real quick. So in the fantasy game on the ITT stages, Tissot sponsors a time trial question where you can get up to 100 bonus points by guessing the time correctly. I'm not sure what happened exactly here for Roger, because it shows that he did not answer the question, but he also was awarded 100 points. So not exactly sure what happened there. It may mean that this was what was on offer and he got 0 points. I can't go back in time to see what happened here, but I think that he forgot to answer the question, so he missed out on 100 points there. However, after much debate in our Discord channel, Tomas and I went with the same exact time estimate, 29:12, which was pretty damn close to 28:52. So we got 94 out of the 100 points that were on offer. If we go back to the teams, there was only one trade that was made today, which was Tomas decided to drop Groenewegen. Good timing on that, I guess, and pick up Wout van Aert, who unfortunately did not end up doing much in this ITT. He was struggling and trying to conserve his energy, I think. But that was the only trade made today. So let's take a look at stage 8. Stage 8 was another flat stage with the main characters coming in first and second, Gourmet over Philipsen this time. Pretty straightforward sprint stage. If we look at the points on the day, again, there wasn't much of a breakaway besides our hero, the GOAT, Jonas Abrahamsson, out alone for almost the entire day. So you can see he didn't even finish in the top 100 on the stage. He got 0 stage finish points. And yet, because of his breakaway, combined with his polka dot jersey and some other points here and there, he actually scored more points on this day than the stage winner, Biniam Girmay, who also picked up the second place in the intermediate sprint after Jonas took away first place from the break. So again, I'm beating the dead horse, but breakaway points are too powerful. If we look at our teams here, there's a couple of things to note. The first is this big, ugly red bar underneath Pedersen on my team that says out. That means that I forgot to sell Pedersen, even though his team had announced in the morning before the start of the stage that he would not start. So this was just really me not taking my own advice, which is to set an alarm if you live in the United States and wake up early and figure out what the news is before the stage starts. Because had I woken up early, I would have seen the news and I would have traded him off my team. And I was specifically planning to pick up Girmay, who ended up winning today. The good news is that we had been talking about this in the Discord server. We knew that Pedersen had crashed hard the day before, so he might be out. And Tomas, living in Europe, woke up on time, found the news out and made the trade. He got rid of Pedersen and picked up Girmay. So perfect timing for Tomas. So let's look at stage 9. So stage 9 was a hilly one, another one for the break. Anthony Turgis picked up the win here. Pidcock did come in second, scoring some points after I traded him a few days after I traded him, but I don't quite regret that trade. If we look at the points on the day, again, the majority of the points are going to be focused around the break riders because the break won. And you can see that if you win a stage from the break, there's a lot of points on offer. 381 points for Turgis, from the win, 200 points, but then 131 points, which is equivalent to coming in like third place on the stage. More than that, I believe, just from being in the break. So huge point scoring day and big opportunity for folks who had people like Javier Romo on their team to score a lot of points. So if we look over at our fantasy rosters, the only trade here that was made was I did finally get rid of Pedersen because he was out of the tour. I picked up Gurmai a day late. I wish I had picked him up sooner. But the other thing that I did was I got rid of Renard and picked up Abrahamson. You know, it took me 9 stages, but eventually I realized that I should have listened to my own advice before the start of the tour because Abrahamson was going to keep on going into breaks, keep on scoring points, still picking up polka dot jersey points at the end of every day. Just a good pick. So you can see now all three of our heroes here have Abrahamson on the team. All right, let's look at stage 10. So stage 10 was another flat sprint stage. Our two main characters, Philipsen and Gurmai, again came 1-2, this time Philipsen ahead of Gurmai. Actually, Wout van Aert decided to sprint for once, weirdly enough, despite the fact that I had just traded him. But in any case, pretty straightforward sprint stage. If we look at the points on the day, there's not a whole lot to mention here besides that there wasn't a big break. So the point distribution looks normal. It's one of those stages. So the people that did well on the stage generally did well overall for points. Not too much to talk about there. If we look over at our team rosters, I mentioned that I had traded Wout van Aert and Nikias Arndt, who was my minimum cost rider, for De Lee and Frank Vandenbroek. Again, I'm much too late picking up Vandenbroek. He scored the majority of his points early on, but he was still gaining jersey competition points every day, and he still looked really strong, so I felt like it was good to pick him up. De Lee did not end up paying off. He was sort of there or thereabouts in a lot of the sprints, but he never spiked a win and didn't do as well as we would have hoped. So De Lee really wasn't the best pickup, but it was the right day to pick up a sprinter. So with that, let's go to our second mountain stage, stage 11. So stage 11 was a pretty exciting mountain stage. This is where we still had a bit of hope that there was going to be a real competition for the yellow jersey because Jonas, not only was Pogacar not able to drop Jonas, but Jonas pipped him on the line for his only win of the tour, stealing what ended up being, would have been Tade's 7th win of the tour. But Jonas took one from him. So we were all feeling like this is going to be a great battle. As we know now, it didn't pan out that way. Tade won all of the remaining mountain stages, save one that went to the break. But it was a great stage, really exciting to see them sprinting at the end of a long mountain climb. If we look at the points on the day, Tade, due to a variety of factors, namely the combative award, actually beat out Jonas for the points on the day, even though Jonas pipped him on the line for the stage win. So again, it goes to show you that on mountain stages, you should set Tadej Pogacar as your stage win bonus because even on the days where he's going to lose to Jonas, he's going to score more points in the fantasy league. So there was a big break, so it was cool to see folks like Healy, scoring a lot of points on today's stage, and this informed some folks' decision to pick up Healy a little bit later on in the tour. If we go over to our fantasy teams, there were no trades made on today's stage. So with that, we're looking at the same teams as the day before. So let's look at stage 12 now. 12 was another flat sprint stage. It went to Biniam Girmay, his third, I believe, and final of the tour. Wout van Aert sprinted again. He was coming into form. He got second place. Makes sense because I had just dropped him the few days previous. If we look at the points on the day, nothing too noteworthy besides that the GOAT, Jonas Abrahamson, he's at it again. He's in the break for 141 kilometers, adding up his points for the day to finish second just behind the stage winner, Girmay. Also, Pacher, Madouas, Turgis, a few other folks that were in the break all day scored more points than the second place finisher, Wout van Aert. So that's a little bit noteworthy. If we look at our fantasy teams, On today's stage, Roger actually made it a trade. He finally got rid of that deadweight Ciccone. So it took him 12 stages to decide to get rid of, well, 11 stages to get rid of Ciccone. He ended up picking up Turgis, and he also got rid of Bernard, who was one of his lesser costed riders, and picked up Cocard, um, which makes sense going into these, these two back-to-back flat stages to pick up two sprinters. And Turgis also was in the break, so great pickup, great timing. So let's look at stage 13, which is our last sprint stage for a little while. So this one went to Jasper Philipsen. Again, Wout van Aert was sprinting well in this stage of the Tour. Girmay actually was down in fourth with Pascal Ackermann taking third, so that was interesting. But not too much to talk about here. Pretty straightforward sprint stage. If we look at the points on the day, there were a lot of breakaway points given out. There were a lot of people trying to get into the break. Some people managed to stay in the break for quite a while. Our champion here, Jonas Abrahamsen, the GOAT, he was in the break for 76 kilometers. So as a consequence, a lot more points were awarded to folks that didn't end up finishing very high on the stage. So all these folks that scored a couple points or no points at all, those were folks that are scoring the majority of their points from the breakaway. But ultimately, Philipsen won the day. If we look at our fantasy teams, there were no trades made, which makes sense, given that this was the second of a doubleheader of flat stages. But tomorrow we're going into the mountains, so there's certainly going to be a bunch of changes being made. So let's take a look at stage 14. Big mountain stage here. Lots of climbing. Pogacar wins over Jonas by over 30 seconds, really starting to break away and put those doubts to rest after Jonas pipped him in the last mountain stage. So Tadej wins the stage. Points pretty straightforward. There's a number of folks that were in the breakaway for a little while, but because the GC guys won the day, the majority of the point scorers were our big GC leaders who at this point in the tour were pretty clearly established here. If we look at our fantasy teams, there's a bunch of changes that were made. So first of all, I traded Philipsen and DeLee for Vingegaard and Almeida. I actually forgot in the video I made earlier today, I forgot that I had picked up Almeida here. I was saying that he wasn't really worth picking up, but I forgot that he was at this stage. So I picked up finally Vingegaard and I picked up Almeida. It was just the right time to get rid of the sprinters, especially when Philipsen wasn't dominating every sprint. Biniam was winning half the sprints and Biniam was winning the green jersey competition. So it just didn't make sense to hold a 25 cost sprinter instead of a 15 cost sprinter on my team throughout. And obviously I needed to pick up Vingegaard and one other climber, and I figured that Almeida was best. Similarly, Tomas traded Wout van Aert and DeLee, and he picked up Vingegaard and Healy. So he picked up Healy after he had performed well on some previous mountains or breakaway stages, and Vingegaard as well. And then finally, Roger traded away Philipsen and Girmay and Cocard. He had picked up an extra sprinter for that little doubleheader of sprint stages, and he picked up Vingegaard, Lezcano, and Healy. So he also picked up Healy, he picked up Lezcano, and he picked up Vingegaard. So we all picked up Vingegaard on today's stage and dropped a sprinter. So that makes sense. Let's look at stage 15. Another huge mountain stage with a lot of climbing. So of course the cream rises to the top. Tadej this time taking over a minute over Jonas ahead of Remco. And at this point, it was pretty clear who was climbing the best. 1, 2, 3, Pogacar, Vingegaard, Evenepoel. That meant that, the leader slots, at least for Evenepoel, because he's eligible for the white jersey, was holding the white jersey, and Pogacar are pretty much locked in for everyone. And then it was a question as to who the third leader. Some riders were picking up Carlos Rodriguez because he was second in the white jersey competition, but I had Vingegaard, as did the other two guys we're looking at. So at this point, we're clearly in the stage of the race where you want to have your big leaders, because the three riders that you have on your team classified as leader are going to be scoring the majority of the points. If we look at the points scored on the day, you can see that. Just look down the list. This is where we can see the majority of the people scoring points are scoring points as a leader. So the top 5 and 7 of the top 10 were all classified as leaders. Unsurprisingly, Tadej Pogacar at the top. He took Toc Mars. He's holding yellow. Blah 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 blah. Pretty straightforward. If we look over at our fantasy teams, I made no changes today. Neither did Roger. But Tomas actually traded out Oliveira for Gregoire. I don't remember the reasoning here. I don't know that this necessarily helped him, but I think he had some traits to spare, and maybe he had a good hunch about Gregoire. In any case, that was the only trade made on the day. Let's look at stage 16. Stage 16 was the last pure sprint stage of the tour. Interestingly, this was the first time ever that the tour finished in Nice instead of the Paris area, because they were trying to deconflict with the 2024 Paris Olympics. So there was going to be no sprint on the Champs-Élysées in stage 21. So this was the last day for the sprinters, and Jasper Philipsen brought it up to even with Biniam to take three apiece. He took his third win. If we look at the points on the day, there wasn't much of a break. Uh, so majority of the points went to the sprinters. So nothing too surprising here. If we look over at our fantasy teams, there was only one trade that any of the three of us made today, and this was Roger. He actually traded out Frank Vandenbroek and picked up Javier Romo, which I don't quite remember where Vandenbroek was at this point in the tour, but Romo was definitely scoring a lot of points. He was doing well. He was classified as a young rider. He was up in the white jersey competition in addition to going into breaks. So great pickup by him. Let's look at stage 17. Stage 17 was noteworthy in that it was the only mountain stage that Pogacar or Vingegaard didn't win. For some reason, UAE decided to let a big break go up the road, and eventually Carapaz bridged across, and he ended up winning ahead of Simon Yates over 7 minutes, I believe. Yeah, 7 minutes ahead of the main group. So big break day. Also, this was the day where Carapaz really cemented um, his polka dot jersey aspirations. If we look at the points on the day, a few riders that made it to the end scored a lot of points. Interestingly, they only gave Carapaz 15 kilometers of breakaway points. I think that was because the race was so fragmented. He wasn't in the front group until the last 15K. But still, with the stage win, he scored the most points. And actually, today didn't offer a whole ton of points because it was a relatively small break, it seems. I'm not quite remembering the stage. Uh, in any case, if we look over at our fantasy teams, the only trade that any of us made was I actually got rid of Girmay. I'm not sure that was the right move, but I got rid of Girmay, and I also got rid of Grelier, and I picked up Javier Romo. So I mentioned that Roger had picked up Romo the day before, and was a pretty good pickup. I was just seeing that he was scoring jersey points even on days where he wasn't heavily involved. Let's look at stage 18. Stage 18 was a big one. A lot of folks in the break. A lot. Look at all these red badges. A lot of folks in the break. I think they took, what's this, 1340 on the GC group. Huge, huge break on a hilly day. Lots of activity. And as a consequence, tons of points being scored. Look at all these people scoring points. Some of these riders are horrible riders that didn't actually do anything in terms of results in the tour, but they got a lot of points today because it was such a big break. Victor Campenaerts took home the win, and so he scored the most points. And given that he was in the break pretty much the whole day, but just real noteworthy thing here is just how many raw points were scored on today. And so this was a day where people could make a difference if they had some of these, cheaper riders. If you were still holding on to Julian Bernard, or for some reason you randomly had Bart Lemon, who's a domestique for for Visma, you would have scored yourself a nice 188 if you had him. Or Verchet, six stars, 269 points. Great day to get some surprise points that from the riders that you weren't really expecting to earn a lot of points from. If we look over at our fantasy teams here, there were no trades made on today's stage. Interestingly, though, this is where the stage of the tour where we're all lined up with having Healy. He did okay, but not sold in retrospect that it was the best choice for all of us to pick up Healy. But he was just looking so good. He was looking so good. I think it hurt his chances a little bit that his teammate Carapaz was trying to win the polka dot jersey competition, because it meant they put a lot of resources into that. And Healy actually worked in support of Carapaz a little bit in these last few stages. All right, let's look at stage 19. Stage 19 was awesome. And I can say that because I was at the finish. I saw Pogacar beat Matteo Jorgensen by 21 seconds, final kilometer of this climb up to Isola 2000. Such a cool stage, such a great memory for me. I'm going to remember that day for the rest of my life. But another big dominant mountain performance from Pogacar. I mean, here he took a 142 on Evenepoel and Vingegaard. So really, he's just cementing his status not just as the likely winner of this tour, but one of the most dominant winners of the Tour de France that we've seen in since I've been following cycling. If we look at the points on the day, there actually were a few folks that were in the breakaway for much of the day. Again, Carapaz was really going at it, trying to secure his position in the polka dot jersey, which he did pick up today. I don't think he had clinched it yet, but he certainly held it. Interestingly, Pogacar scored fewer points than both Carapaz and Jorgensen because of their time spent in the break, even though he pipped Jorgensen in the end for the win. If we look over at our fantasy teams, Roger made a couple trades. So Roger got rid of Turgis and Healy, and he picked up Grelier, really just freeing up some points for him to be able to afford Almeida, who at this point was looking to be maybe not a huge point scorer, but coming down to the last couple of days because of his position in the yellow jersey and because of his just consistency in the mountains. He was looking likely to be the best way to spend 19 points if you cannot afford to spend it on a leader. So the fact that he's classified as a climber is what made him so appealing here. All right, let's look at our last mountain stage, stage 20. Stage 20, Pogacar had already pretty much an insurmountable lead, so he didn't maybe go all out. He only took 7 more seconds on Vingegaard. Interestingly, Carapaz was still up there. He didn't get the win that he was looking for, but he held on long enough to get the polka dots on the second to last climb of the day, so he secured the polka dot jersey. If we look at the points on the day, there was a bit of a break. Mas was in the breakaway for a long time, which frankly I don't quite remember, because when you think mountain breakaway, you don't always think Enric Mas. He's normally the one who's chugging along in group 2 or the back of group 1, trying to hold on to the big guys as long as he can. But he ended up scoring a lot of points on today's stage. Ultimately, Pogacar won his 5th, and that was 4 out of 5 for the big mountain stages for him. If we look at the fantasy teams, only one trade was made today. Tomas traded Girmay and Gregoire for Jorgensen and Romo. I think he was just doing the math going into the last 2 stages, just based on where everyone was in the jersey competitions. He was just doing the math and realizing that Gregoire wasn't going to earn him many points on the last day. The last day, of course, granting 3 times the usual amount of jersey points. He just wanted to pick up some more consistent points, so he picked up Jorgensen and Romo. Which I think was a good idea. In fact, I picked up Jorgensen the next day. So with that, let's look at the final stage, the ITT into Nice, from Monaco to Nice, stage 21. Stage 21 was also one to remember, mostly just because I was there standing on the promenade by the beach in Nice, watching everyone finish, and man, it was so cool. Lots of emotion, lots of cheers for not just the leaders, but for people like, Romain Bardet got probably the biggest cheer of them all in his final final Tour de France. There was a lot of climbing in this TT, and you could see the fatigue in everyone's legs, and Pogacar just slammed everyone. It didn't even look like he was breathing through his mouth when he came through the final turn. So really established himself as a dominant champion. He took by the end over 6 minutes on Vingegaard, and it was almost 30 minutes down to 10th place. So really dominant performance. If we look at the points on the day, you'll note that the jersey points are multiplied by 3. So, for example, Carapaz got 90 points for holding the polka dot jersey instead of 30. That's just because it's the final stage. So the holder of these jerseys on today's stage are the final holders of the jersey for the tour. So these jersey points were extra important, and that's why having these stats available to you the night before when you're choosing your team, I find is very useful to view it in a format like this. I can, for example, look at only the jersey points. So I was doing a lot of analysis of these 4 columns the night before, looking at who was earning which amounts of points in the jersey competitions, multiplying them by 3, and trying to see if I could optimize a trade here or there to try to come up with the ideal team. And actually, I left a trade on the table because at this point, I think that Tomas and Roger had spent all their trades, but I had 2 remaining. And the only trade that I found was actually, plus EV for me, was to trade out Almeida for Jorgensen, which was just a really minor improvement of points. But I had 2 trades to spare, and I might as well use them. So You could say that's good planning. You could say that's very bad planning that I didn't use my trades early. And in fact, one of the things I'll note was Tomas's willingness to spend a bunch of his trades early on to really capitalize on those early leads that he had gotten from the good cheap riders he had picked up early in the tour. And that's ultimately, I think, what put him in a position to win. And he nearly did win. He finished fourth in the overall league behind Roger, who finished first. So if you stuck with me through this crazy long video and heard me ramble about all this history here, thank you. I'm eager to move on to making some videos about the 2025 Tour de France, so stay tuned for a few of those that are going to be posted to my channel this week. With that, have a good day. Thank you.